And before we get into this, on the last page of your notes, you see a bibliography or a works cited page like this. I definitely want to emphasize that nothing in this, although I'm presenting it in my own words, none of this is mine, and I don't want to imply that I was smart enough to write books like this explaining the problem of evil. Few limitations and a few focusing on what topic, what subject are we actually talking about this morning. And one thing that we are not talking about is, does God exist? That is a completely different question, and it's a good question, and it has answers to it. But the question we're dealing with today usually takes the form of, if God exists, if a good God exists, if a good, powerful, all-knowing God exists, then how can evil also exist? That's much closer to the question that we're going to deal with this morning. So if somebody's asking, does God exist, which is a terrific question, that's not this. Does that make sense? I want to absolutely clarify that. Now, this is a very important distinction to make. This morning, we're dealing with the logical problem of evil, not the emotional problem of evil. And what that means is, when we look at the earth, when we look at the big picture, when we look at all of human history and everything, why does evil exist in the big picture? Not, why did this happen? This happened in my life, this was bad, tell me why it happened. That's not what we're dealing with this morning. We're dealing with the logical problem. So it would be the same between a philosopher versus a counselor. A philosopher is going to explain deep philosophical meanings, whereas a counselor is going to listen to you, is going to try and hear what happened, what caused it, what can you learn from it, how are you dealing with it. And we have to stay on the logical side this morning. We're putting on our philosopher hats, not our counselor hats. Because the answers that we're going to offer this morning to the big question are not very helpful to the incidental. Because bad things happen isn't a good answer to, why did Fluffy die? You know? These answers are much colder, and when you're actually going through something, you want something not cold, you want something hot, you want something warm and feeling and stuff. So we're making a distinction between the logical problem of evil and the emotional problem of evil. Another thing that we're going to make sure that we're talking about is the Christian view of the God, or the biblical view of God, and not other views of God. We're not going to do the work of the Muslims this morning. We're not going to do the works of the Eastern religions this morning. We're not going to do the work of the atheistic counselor. They can do their own work. We're going to do our work this morning. Before we go any further, I think it's important to identify evil and to break it into at least two categories. And the first category would be natural evil. Natural evil are naturally caused in the world. These are caused not by the free choice of a free creature. And that's going to distinguish this from another type of evil. But what falls into this category? Well, things like natural disasters, weather related things. A tornado happens and the tornado wrecks the town, and unfortunately there are fatalities in the tornado. And people wake up the next morning going, this happened. Now, nobody caused the tornado. No free agent stood over here and said, I'm going to cause a tornado and I'm going to send it through that town there. The same can be true when it comes to something like plate tectonics. And an earthquake happens. And families are devastated and communities are torn apart and tragedy happens. Or, for example, the side of a mountain in the middle of the night just falls off the mountain. That's Quake Lake up in Montana. It happened. Extraterrestrial impacts here, I'm not talking about E.T. coming from another planet. I'm talking about if you ever saw Armageddon and the asteroids hit the Earth and it wipes people out and things of that nature. So basically anything that would fall under natural weather, Earth, out of Earth, etc., etc. Another thing that would fall under this would be diseases. And although we could make some distinctions when it comes to something, for example, like cancer, we could say, well, that person smoked for 40 years and they developed lung cancer. Cause and effect. Is that really evil? That's not our position this morning. We also know that there are cancers that just happen. Nobody can tell you why so-and-so got that cancer. It just happened, you know. Plagues and epidemics. We're in a relatively sterile environment today. We don't have plagues and epidemics the way they used to have them, but it still happens. And it's not necessarily somebody making the choice to make everybody sick. You know, it's just something that has happened in world history. And finally, disabilities. You know, people are born disabled in various ways. And those just happen in some situations and circumstances. And even if they ever definitively one day prove that aspartame does cause autism or aspartame does cause Alzheimer's, nobody drank that Diet Coke thinking, I want to give my unborn child autism, or I want to give myself Alzheimer's, you know. So here we're talking about those kinds of things. One other category to just try and catch everything that falls under the natural evil would be accidents that truly nobody caused it. We sometimes call it dumb luck. We sometimes call it happenstance. Here we have a little bit of weather meets accident. The snow fell, the black ice formed, and the car went off the road. Nobody stood there saying, I'm going to make that car go off the road, you know. Nobody chose to drink that night and then go drive, and that caused the accident. We just have those kinds of things where accidents happen, and truly nobody is at fault. Now we're going to put natural evil against moral evil. Moral evil could be free choices made by free creatures. That's where somebody or some group decided to do this of their own choice to do it. What would some of these be? Well, one of the most obvious would be murder. Somebody chooses to end the life of somebody else. Now here we could get into nuance in the fact that even in our legal system you can be charged with first-degree murder, you can be charged with involuntary manslaughter. You know, and we recognize that malice and forethought versus accident, even with negligence, is not identical. We see that, right? And so murder, here we're using that as a term of so-and-so deliberately, intentionally, with malice and forethought ended somebody's life, and we call that murder, right? Another thing would be rape, and this though brings up a whole new idea. I want to be very clear with my language here so that my words can't be twisted into some way that Ozzy said rape sometimes can be a good thing. That's not what I said. I want you to think of something like water. Water is neither good nor bad. Water can be used to water crops, water can be used to drink and keep you alive, but you can also drown in water. Is it water's fault that you drowned in it? Probably not. Is it anybody's fault that somebody can drown in water? Probably not. So water is neither good nor bad. Things can happen from water. Food. Who here likes food? Food can be used to nourish you, to keep you alive. It can be used for taste. and good ways. If you eat food, though, you might get food poisoning. Your only option is starvation or food poisoning. What do? You know. So when it comes to something like rape, is sex has been taken, and sex is neither good nor bad unto itself. It can be good when used for marital intimacy and procreation and so forth, but rape would be taking something and using it in a bad way, perverting how it should be used, using it in rape or abuse or so forth. Now, we could literally go on to infinity. Thank you. Trying to figure out how many types of moral evil there are and what qualifies as moral evil or what doesn't qualify as moral evil. The bottom line is we all know that moral evil exists, right? And I want to reference Fyodor Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right. I do not want to imply that I've read this entire book. This is a very, very long book. I have read Notes from the Underground. I have read The Dream of a Ridiculous Man. I've only read one chapter of this book, and it happens to be Book 5, Chapter 4, The Rebellion. In Dostoevsky's story here, two brothers are talking about the existence of God, and in this chapter, one brother presents the very argument that we're talking about, and he does so in a way that is beautiful, not what he describes being beautiful, but his description of the problem of evil is so perfect that the brothers Karamazov is actually found in both Christian texts that try to explain evil. It's also found as an example in secular texts that's trying to explain the existence of evil, because he does so perfectly here. The one brother is telling the other brother, this atrocity happened, and then this atrocity happened, and then this atrocity happened, and the worst of all was this atrocity. And if all of these atrocities can happen and God doesn't do anything, then I don't want anything to do with God. So he, that brother in that text, puts forward our argument in such a Dostoevsky kind of way that, like I said, both Christian and secular have used this as the launching point for the argument. When it comes to evil, we have two responses. We can, first of all, acknowledge that evil exists. In acknowledging that evil exists, we acknowledge that it's a real thing, and we acknowledge that it exists in different forms. And really, personally, not just from a Christian perspective, from a person living on planet Earth with eyes and ears and access to the newspaper, I don't even need the Bible to tell you that evil exists. I think you can come to the conclusion that evil exists and it's real, even if you didn't have the Bible. Your other position would be denial. Evil does not exist, and evil is not really evil. This could be in the form of spiritualism, in the form of something like Christian Science that teaches that evil is an illusion. Everything like that is an illusion, and it's not real. The other position of evil is not really real. This could be explained in certain forms of humanitarianism or atheism, where nothing can truly be evil if there is no God. It can only be less good. It can only be less beneficial to our society, to you as a person, and so forth. I'll let you decide, is evil real or is evil not real? Here we come to the question. And I've written the question out, and I've tried to word it in such a way that we can progress through the question. If God is all-knowing, then He knows when evil, both natural and moral, will happen. If God is all-powerful, then He can stop evil from happening. If God is all good, then He should stop evil from happening. Because evil happens, He must not be all-knowing, or all-powerful, or all-good, or He must not exist. This is the way the argument is often presented. Sometimes it's worded slightly different, but this is the way that the argument exists. This is not a new argument. This goes all the way back to Epicurus, at least to Epicurus, in the 3rd or 4th century. And I would dare say that Epicurus probably is just the first one to write it down. I'm pretty sure that it's been around much longer than Epicurus. It's also a modern question in the sense that during the Enlightenment, humanist David Hume restated the question, basically, again, trying to use evil as a way to disprove the existence of God. So, how do we respond? How do we deal with this argument? Well, one good question would be, does the question accurately describe God, at least God as we understand Him from a biblical sense? The question describes Him as all-knowing. We call that omniscient. All-powerful. We call that omnipotent. And He is all good, or benevolent, perfectly moral, things of that nature. Does that fit the description of God that we find in the Bible? I'm just going to give you the short answer, yes. And there in your notes, I've given you plenty of biblical references, and we could continue looking at biblical references to continue to build the case. God is all-knowing, God is all-powerful, and God is morally perfect. So then another question to ask that question would be, is this, the presentation of God in the question, is it an accurate view that the church, both traditionally and today, hold in regard to God? Does the question describe how Christians view God? Once again, I'm going to give you the short answer, yes. That's not to say that not all Christians throughout all history and even today agree on exactly what those things mean, but the question is not misrepresenting the biblical view, and the question is not misrepresenting the historical and traditional views of God. So then, what do we do with that? If they're describing God accurately, and they're describing our understanding of God accurately, and they're pointing all these things out that seem to be true, and yet evil still exists, what do we do with that? Well, first of all, the Bible acknowledges the existence of evil. It's right there in the pages of Scripture. It says that evil exists. So the Bible is not hopelessly optimistic, saying, la 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 la, evil doesn't exist, believe in God, feel good, have a good day. You know, that's not Bible, is it? Does anybody know where that comes from? No, right? The other thing that the Bible acknowledges is the existence of God. He is in there, by the way. A little bit of a newsflash for some people there, right? So the biblical authors sat down to write the Bible, and they acknowledged that evil existed, and they acknowledged that God existed. And when they wrote, they didn't find a contradiction between those two positions. Evil exists and God exists. And if the existence of God and the existence of evil are coherent, then how do we answer the question? Because it's a good thing that the Bible acknowledges the existence of evil, because that brings it out of hopeless and gives us an answer. We're about to get into an argument presented by Alvine Plantinga. There in your notes you see I corrected the spelling of his name. I don't know why I got it wrong the first time. Alvine Plantinga's argument is called the free will defense, and it's God can have reasons for permitting evil to exist. Now, at this point, somebody might say, well, that's a non sequitur. That's a non-answer in the sense that you're just saying God's ways are higher than our ways. So just shut up and behave yourself and just keep believing in God and keep going. They could accuse him and me then of saying that, but that's not what we're saying. In the free will argument, the omniscient God, the all-knowing God, did know that evil would result, and the omnipotent God could have made things differently. Because he knew that evil would exist, he could have made things differently, and yet the morally perfect God chose to allow the existence of evil, and it's because he could have good reasons for the existence of evil. Everybody track so far? The God that is all of those omnis created the potential for evil, but by creating creatures that are free. So God created creatures that have free will, and by creating creatures that have free will, he created the potential for it. It was the humans that actualized evil. God didn't actualize evil. It was the human that actualized evil. God knew of this actualization. Therefore, there is evil because God has good reason for evil to exist. And it's at this point that our skeptic may ask, why did this happen? Now, I want you all to think of a time that something that you would identify as either natural or moral evil. I want you to think of a time that it happened. And I want you to think specifically of a time that it happened, and because it happened, your life changed, and eventually you can see that it created the potential for a good. Did that make sense? That is to say, it happened, and it was evil. And we're not diminishing its quality of evil. It's still evil. And yet, because it happened, other things happened, and here we are today, and it's better, or it's at least good, or it's not the same as it was. Does that make sense? Are we tracking so far? Sometimes we're in that position to see that, right? I can think of examples in my life where I don't like that happened. I really don't. That changed my life. However, because my life changed, I eventually met Christy, you know? And anything that led me to Christy, I've just got to say, was a good thing. There are times that we can figure out, because X happened, Y eventually happened, and Y is a good thing. We, though, are not in a position to know all of the events, to know everything, and to know what resulted from everything that could have ever happened. I want to introduce the concept of the butterfly effect. You've probably heard this before. A butterfly flaps its wings in the Amazon and it creates a tornado in Texas. You've heard this, right? No? Okay. Well, it's also sometimes called chaos theory. Now, nobody is actually literally saying the butterfly caused the tornado. The point is, small changes over here can make huge changes way over here. It's sometimes called chaos theory. It's sometimes called other things like that. Once again, I want you to think of a choice you've ever made in your life where you could have chosen A, or you could have chosen not A. So not A could be B, or it could just not be A. You got it? How did that event change your life? There are tons of events where you chose A or you chose not A, and it changed your life. Are there times that you can't tell if it changed your life? Okay, so then, now that you have that, I want you to multiply that 1 times every choice you've ever made in your entire life. I don't know what number you're at, I know what number I'm at. And now, we're going to multiply that number again by every person who's ever lived on planet Earth. And now we're going to multiply it one more time by the number of choices that they've ever made. And I have got an astronomical number in my head. Do you also? Or did I leave you back at 1? It seems to me, just on the surface, that the majority of the DNA in this room must come from Europe. That's not to say that there's not other DNA present in the room, but it seems that the majority of the DNA in this room comes from Europe. What caused the majority of that DNA, the majority of the DNA here to get here? Here is not Europe. Now, I've only done limited genealogy, only grandparents and great-grandparents. I have at least 2 generations on every line in the U.S., but some go back much, much further into the old world, whichever old world I'm talking about. What do you think made my great-great-great leave and come here? Could it be because he was poor there and America was the land of opportunity? Could it be because there was famine and plague, war and disaster, evil there that drove him, her out? And eventually we get to here where I live in relative security, relative calmness, relative niceness. Could my life be better? Sure. Could it be worse? Sure, you know. But they experienced possibly evil, which drove them from their homeland. And yet today, I, their descendant, am living a pretty good life. I have to say, compared to other parts of the world, I'm living it high, you know. I shouldn't say that in Colorado. Now that's just one potential example. Did my relative ever know? Did he, when he got here, did he have to live in a squalor in New York? You know? I don't know. I don't know those details. Did she ever experience the good life before they died when they fled from their home country? I don't know. Am I living the good life? Yeah. So if you ask them, if we could resurrect them right here, and one of them could stand here, and you could say, "Hey, you experienced this evil, and it was horrible, and da 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 da. But your grandson, your great 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 grandson, is living pretty good. So was that evil worth it?" I mean, that's a hard question to ask somebody, right? And is it possible then that if that's happened in the past, it could happen again in the present? We could experience tribulation and hard times and evil today, and it could result in something better eventually. I'm going to introduce you to one new concept, and that is, it's the wonderful life effect. You've seen the movie. This isn't so much science fiction as this one is much more theology, but George Bailey is given the opportunity to see what life would be like if he had not existed. And you've seen the movie, right? And you've seen how many things changed because he existed. Well, that's the problem here. We can't tell how many things happen because I exist, because you exist. We'll never know how we affected other people, or how other people affected us, or how other people affected other people that affected us, or on and on and on and on, right? Finally, I want to introduce you to the concept About Time. About Time is a science fiction movie where a character has the ability to time travel. This is not a new concept. In fact, the idea that he explores is a concept right there in the pages of The Time Machine. Was that Orson Welles? I think Orson Welles? Right there in the pages of The Time Machine. The character finds that he can travel through time and he can change events. Sometimes he finds out that that because bad things happen, good things come of it. He also found out that sometimes if he changes the bad thing, then the good thing doesn't come about. Now, this is all in the realm of did it happen? Could it happen? Would it happen? It's all out there in the could've, would'ves, maybes, right? But I want to ask you, are these could've, would'ves, maybes, are they possible? They're very possible. And are we, temporal beings, limited in our geographical location, limited in our ability to understand how everything works and functions and touches everything else, are we then in a good position to tell God, this happened and it was evil and you had no right to do it? That's a pretty bold statement. Somebody could accuse me, the skeptic, our friend the skeptic, could accuse me of going way beyond anything that we can really understand. Anything. I'm trying to give one of those answers that blow your mind and try to shut you up, right? But what I've actually just done is referred to our own mythos. These things are in our common mythology. I'm calling our stories, our movies, our culture. I'm calling this our mythos. The same way, had we lived in Greek culture, we would have told the story of Hercules. We would have told the story of Zeus and stuff like that to explain how the crops live and die and stuff like that. We tell our movies. We tell somebody, you need to see that movie because it'll change your life. It tells you about da-da-da-da-da. You've been there, right? I mean, am I making this up? Or is this the way we do talk? Is this the way we do function? So, no. This is not far out there. And so, when we can even grasp these concepts, the butterfly effect, the wonderful life effect, the it's about time effect, we see that we are not in a good position to determine if evil happens, can good come about from it, or can good not come about from it? Now, one further concept, if I can stretch your brain just a little bit further. Somebody could claim, well, what if so-and-so had died? Like in my example where I say that relatives of mine came from their country. What if they had never made it here and they had never died, or they had died and I'd never existed? Is every person, and I don't mean to make light of this, please don't go out of here thinking that Ozzy thinks lightly of this. Is every person that ever died in any tragedy, because they died, is it a lost cause? I don't think so. Because the Holocaust happened, we know the true evil and depravity that man is capable of doing. And from that, we have things in place to prevent another Holocaust from ever happening, right? Now, I'm not saying that if we resurrected a Holocaust victim and told them, your death means that nobody else will die in a concentration camp, that the Holocaust victim would say, oh, good. You know, I'm not trying to say anything like that. But I am saying, how many people remember D.B. Cooper? D.B. Cooper on Thanksgiving Day gets on an airplane with a briefcase. And he tells the person on the airplane with the briefcase, I've got a bomb, give me money. Could you be a D.B. Cooper today? No. Do you know why? Because you'll never get to the plane with the bomb in your suitcase. You're going to be stopped at security. We have security now because of D.B. Cooper. You know? Does that make sense? Does everybody follow that? I think D.B. Cooper is actually a good example because nobody actually, other than possibly him, died in that event. Now we're going to get into the biblical response to this. The biblical response to this. Does the Bible present an unrealistic view of evil? The Bible acknowledges the existence of evil. And we already talked about that fact, that the Bible acknowledges the existence of evil. The Bible does not present or promise a life free from evil and suffering. I would love to find verses in the Bible that tell me you're going to have a great life. I would love the Bible to be much more like a fortune cookie than an ancient document, because all of those fortune cookies have promised me fortune and good times and stuff like that, right? The Bible doesn't say anything like that. It doesn't give any reader the impression that you're going to have a cush life, a great life, and so forth. Look at what Paul, the apostle, the follower of Christ, the author of 1/4 of our New Testament, look at what he writes. We exult in our tribulation. He's not living the cush life. He's not living the great life, Knowing that our tribulation brings about perseverance, and perseverance brings about proven character. Another thing that the Bible does is the Bible presents humanity in a fallen state. Natural man or natural person is hostile towards God. Same thing. Romans chapter 1 and chapter 2. Just the whole Romans chapter 1, chapter 2 basically presents this. But chapter 1, verse 21. They knew God, they did not honor Him as God. They became futile. Foolish hearts were darkened. For this reason, God gave them over to a depraved mind, filled with unrighteousness, wickedness, greed, and envy. Does the Bible present an honest picture of fallen humanity? I think it does. Romans chapter 8, verse 7. Because the mind set on the flesh is hostile to God, for it does not subject itself to the law of God, for it is not even able to do so. The Bible does not present this view of man, that man is good by nature. That natural man just does good things and chooses good things and always behaves nicely and behaves the way the teacher wants him to behave, right? The Bible is not naive in its presentation of man. The Bible presents man as a guy who's willing to get ahead by any means. Willing to get ahead by cheating, willing to get ahead by lying, willing to get ahead by stealing. Is the Bible presenting mankind realistically or fancifully? Very realistically. Life is not all that there is. Now this is something that even Christians, sometimes we get in our head. This is not to say that when your friend calls you up and your friend shares with you, I have cancer and I'm probably going to die. That doesn't mean that we just go, oh, it's okay, I'll see you in the next life. I mean, we're sad, right? We're sad when somebody dies of cancer. We're sad. I think there was a Freudian slip there. We're sad when people die in horrible ways, right? But we do have to keep in mind that this life is not the only life. Paul talks about, we look at the things which are, we look not at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. The things which are not seen are eternal. This is something that is so easy. I get caught up in this. I'm sure everybody gets caught up in it. We think that this life is all that there is. Because, you've got to admit, in a conscious sense, this is all that we've experienced. But I believe it was Francis Chan that once took a rope and he put a foot of rope here and marked it with a tape and said, let's just say that this is your life. The whole rest of the rope is the rest of eternity. So when we think about this little part of life and we think about the rest of eternity, oh, was it even smaller? Not a foot? Oh, okay. It's so easy though, right? So easy to get wrapped up in the idea that what happens in this life is somehow permanent, that what happens in this life is somehow the most important thing. When somebody is murdered, it's a horrible thing, but that's not the end of the story. That's not the end of the story, both for the murdered and for the murderer, right? Relationship with God and not earthly pleasures are presented as the true value. The Bible, once again, doesn't promise the good life. It doesn't even pretend to promise the good life. And it never says that this life is the only life. It presents your knowledge, your relationship with God is what truly matters. Does that then change the nature of the question? If we've already explained that God can have good reason for permitting evil, does the existence of evil still somehow defeat the existence of God? I mean, when you get to thinking in these kinds of terms, that this life is the only life and the good life is the only thing worth living, and all of those kinds of things, then sure, evil is a problem. But when you look at it from a heavenly perspective, so to speak, it doesn't diminish that evil is evil, and I don't want anybody to walk out thinking that Ozzy thinks evil isn't evil. Evil is evil. And evil is a horrible thing. And suffering is real. But temporary suffering in this life is nothing compared to the life that will come. Hey guys, Ozzy here. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you found it helpful. If you found it helpful, I would truly appreciate it if you would share it. Share it with a friend, share it with a family member, share it on social media, what have you. Keep in touch with us. We're going to have more classes coming up, and so I'm going to get these online, and I'm going to try and address topics that are relevant and people are looking at in Christianity. I do appreciate you. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you want. But keep in touch, and again, I just want to thank you.